with some slides. And because I've joined, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Tatiana Diaz. I'm the head of account executive team at Maildoso. And we are email infrastructure provider. So, well, before customers start thinking about segmentation and some things regarding the targeting and GTM, always first request is how to automate the work that they did previously manually. And here some tools and infrastructure is always a question. And so before we dive into our hot topic, how to squeeze maximum out of your outbound and segment your market in a robust way, I would I will walk you through some updates that we've released during the previous year, because this is something that can help companies to scale effectively and at the same time not to overspend on your outbound. Yeah, so first of all, we have released Google Workspace mailboxes, and now as infrastructure provider, we have two types of mailboxes at Maildoso, because one of the main topics of the previous year was diversification. So we have our own provider. I hear some sounds of customers. Yeah, thank you. So we have our own provider, which is Maildoso, and we are hitting 95% of deliverability with it. And we've rolled out Google Workspace mailboxes. So with Maildoso, you can diversify your emails and get the benefit of having two of them or only one, Google Workspace or Maildoso. And the advantage of Google Workspaces is that Google Workspace mailboxes can be connected to any cold email tool. Guys, can you please not switch slides so fast?
1 second, I need 10 seconds to launch live stream on LinkedIn. Give me just 5 seconds.
Okay. So I will keep explaining. And Google Workspace mailboxes can be connected to any cold email tool. With Maildoso, there is no limitation as well. And the benefit of purchasing Google Workspace mailboxes through Maildoso is that we have real Google Workspace licenses. This is not educational panels, not in malware. So you can keep two providers under one subscription and A/B test your offers based on your needs. Besides that, the main aim of our team currently is to simplify working with us. And we've updated our API. And besides API, where you can create mailboxes, domains, and through your product or your CRM, we as well have MCP. So you can even use your preferred language model to create mailboxes, domains, and do all processes that are possible inside of our dashboard. Next. We as well have global custom tracking domain. And this feature allows you to do two things simultaneously. We've upgraded it during the previous year. So before, you could just skip the part with setting up custom tracking domain on the level of your cold email tool. But since the previous year, our global custom tracking domain allows you to mask links and images included in your first email. So for some companies, it could be really beneficial because you can include links and images in your first email without compromising deliverability, because we mask them. So you can, using this feature, you can stand out from competitors and make your emails even more efficient. Next. We as well do reputation management. So there is some option that is available in our dashboard. Like we have Google scores and Microsoft scores right at Maildoso. So, for example, if you run cold email campaigns with some cold email tools, you have high level of analytics, which campaigns are performing and which campaigns are not performing. But when it comes to checking deliverability of specific mailbox, it's always a disaster. Some manual work should be included, like sending plain text or checking your emails through some additional tools. Sometimes it requires additional investments. But at Maildoso, you can just check out your Google scores and Microsoft scores of Maildoso mailboxes and see from the dashboard reputation without any additional things. And apart from it, we brought back our deliverability audit. So our team is always responsible, and we can help you to improve your campaigns. We have self-healing mailboxes feature. So, in fact, we have noticed that lots of cold emailers to support high deliverability of mailboxes do mailbox rotation. So they create 50% of mailboxes more, or maybe 30% of mailboxes more, to always have some of them as a backup. But with Maildoso, you don't even need it because we have self-healing mailboxes feature, and we automatically pause low-performing mailboxes from campaigns, uh, just leaving them on warm-up and bring them to rotation only when deliverability restores. So this is another convenience that is available for our customers. Yeah, and we've hit 5,000 of customers milestone, which is insane. We are so happy to be useful for so many customers, and we see high demand from customers, especially after rolling out additional feature, which is purchasing Google Workspace mailboxes through our dashboard. So we will be happy to onboard every one of you, and I will be happy to consult you. You can DM me. My marketing team will leave my email in comment section. So yeah, and you can add me, join my LinkedIn network. I have a promo code of 10% for each of the customer who will subscribe after this webinar. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Amazing.
So, yeah, thank you so much for
My
your
turn?
attention, Katie. Yeah, this is your turn.
Amazing. Amazing.
I'm excited to hear what you have prepared to us.
Cool. Okay, sweet. So, hello everybody. This is segmenting for message market fit. So subtitle, speak your audience's language, reach them on another level. I have a bunch of slides. I'm gonna like rip through this. So outbound itself is not broken, right? Not even single channel outbound, right? It's very common right now to be saying like, single channel outbound is dead, got to do all bound, got to do multi-channel. Not true. It just feels broken to a lot of people, right? And so what they're seeing is weak results. They feel like they're wasting their time, right? If they do client work, they see turnover. And if they're in a job, right? Like if they're in a role for a company, they often see job turnover, right? Like SDRs. So what are all these people missing, right? Like all the doubters, what are they missing, right? What I call a message market fit, right? So it's what we say to our audience to turn them into hand raisers. So before we get into all of it, why trust me, right? So every dollar I've ever made in my career has actually come from my ability to drive interest in products and services, right? So like doing this is how I pay for my life. My first job ever, I was 16. I got hired at Target in my second month on the job. I was the number one Target card sign up person in the entire country. I like 10x the record. So they gave me a raise from $8 an hour to $8.05 an hour. I'm not kidding about that. And I actually quit because of it. It pissed me off. And so once I got out of college, my first job I was an SDR, right? Like many of people probably here. Then I was a full cycle AE. Then I was head of go-to-market in a pre-product startup. So we didn't have product market fit. We did not even have product. So the idea of product anything fit was non-existent. And so a lot of the skills that I developed basically came from I was accountable towards making like deal flow happen against literally an idea. And there's challenges to that, but I also learned that there's some sort of like opportunity in that we'll get into. Since then, I've worked in GTM services for 5 years total, 2 years for someone else. If any of you know Joey Gilkey, founder of Titan X, I used to work for his agency as head of client delivery. And then I started my business that I'm 2 months away from the 3 year mark at. I also run a Slack community, gtmcafe.com. It's free. There's like 1,600 plus go-to-market operator types in there. It's not a product. I don't do anything with it. We just go learn together, right? So we do stuff, we share stuff, we think about stuff. Valuable place, right? A lot of good stuff happens there. Also, in the words of customers, like our partners, and then our sequencer itself, like we know what we're doing, right? So this isn't just like theoretical. I didn't graduate a boot camp recently to start doing this. Like I've been doing this quite a while. No offense to those people. Love all of you. So enough about me. Let's talk about why outbound actually breaks, right? So let's start with defining message market fit, MMF, as it'll be referenced sometimes. So message market fit actually starts before copy, right? A lot of times people think of like copy, like words. It really starts with audience definition, this concept of who are we even reaching out to, right? What we know about who we're reaching out to determines what we can actually credibly say to them, right? So if I know this list is extremely specific, I have a lot of specific words I can say. If it's like it's every marketer in North America, it's like, God, you don't that's it. And so a lot of teams think they have a copy problem, but they have this audience definition problem because we'll get in more in a second, but so personalization alone is not the answer, right? Precision is. So a lot of people take that big generalized list and they're like reference an interesting fact and stuff like that, and that's fine and that does work. This is not negative. Again, there's a lot of my friends like implement some of these other strategies. This is just like our worldview, right? But I believe that we can generally much more outcompete those results by getting a lot more specific, precise, right? And so if we can't name the audience clearly, the message literally just becomes generic, right? And so when this is done well, message market fit doesn't look like they agree. It's not like, oh my God, we nailed this perfectly. They're not jumping up and down. They're not coming inbound automatically, right? It's like they pause. It's subtle, right? It's like, and anyone who's gotten like great outbound, that's what it does, right? You're not elated, right? You're not excited. You're like intrigued, right? And so where that comes from is it feels in group, right? Like it came from their world, our audience's world, kind of like, man, how does that person know this, right? How do they understand to speak to me that way? When it doesn't feel in group, it basically comes off as like vendor centric, right? Like an advertisement, like I do this, we do this, we're about this, and no one wants that, so they ignore it, right? They don't even reject it, like delete per se. They just don't perceive it. Doesn't I deleted a million messages before this, I don't know what they were because they're, didn't stand out. So, that's like what message market fit is conceptually. Now let's talk about like the default outbound pattern, right? If we talk about this concept of pattern interrupt, we need to understand what is the pattern itself. And so the common pattern is people start with their tools and then they define like what we're going to do with them, right? So people hear like Salesforce is a good CRM, they get Salesforce and then they go, okay, what are the fields? And then they get a headache and they're like, Salesforce sucks. And it's really like, no, it's just the wrong tool for your job, right? So a lot of these people go literally just open up their data tool, right? Whatever they use. And they go, okay, who's the market we're going to go after, right? Who do we reach out to? And then they apply some filters, right? Okay, this industry, this headcount, right? Like West Coast, North America, like whatever it might be. Maybe they're like, who are on Google, right? Something like that. And the way I see it, that's like market selection, right? It's like nice, how convenient that we all want the, 51 to 500 headcount companies that are growing, blah, 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 right? So that's not a segment. That's just this thing that we say, from our perspective, I would like this. Right. And so the thing is, this market, this list you just built, that is not a single audience, right? Within that, you're going to have all sorts of variation. And so markets hold these different realities, right? You apply the filters, you're going to have different constraints within there. You're going to have different language people use. So a common one I use among salespeople is think of like the head of sales for a product led versus marketing led versus sales led growth company, right? Different metrics that they're being measured on. The volume of events that are happening are different. So the way that they think about who's my audience, what do I go do with them, it's going to be different. Literally different words, right? So if you're trying to say like what good thing you can do to all heads of sales in Series B tech, you're like, I can help lead flow or I can help you get deals, right? If you're specific to product-led growth, you can be really specific about like converting high value, signups. If it's sales-led growth, it's like, I can help you monitor your target account list to understand when blah, blah, blah is happening, right? So one message to the market, this concept of the market literally forces like a middle ground argument, right? In the middle is where this message dies. We need to be polarizing. We have to agitate the sort of status quo. And so what happens when people do that is they blame the channel, right? They're like, email sucks, right? And they're wrong. It's not email, it's their audience definition. Like, yeah, it doesn't work to just say, I want this and yeet that into the world. So the framework that I developed to sort of address this is as follows, right? And for some of you, you might be thinking this is more simple than it needs to be. And there is like, you can add complexity to this, but 99% of the time, nothing that a company is doing is in this context. And if it was, it would perform better. So first we start with market, right? And so market is basically that thing that we said at the beginning. That's what most teams think of when they think of who's my audience. And it's like the filters in the data tool, which is great. You start there. Then we want to go segment, right? And so for me, a segment is a dividing line that meaningfully changes how we would communicate to this audience, right? So it's not just what is the list, but it's like, what is the thinking patterns behind this audience, right? So again, um, if you took like VPs of sales, right? And like you'd have some of these people maybe who are multi-time VP of sales, some of these people who are came up as an SDR, AE, then became VP of sales. Some of these people were enterprise AE at Salesforce and then joined a startup as a VP of sales, right? And each of these people has a very different experience. And the way we talk to them, it would be easy to allude to like how we could support them in that context if we knew that. It's really hard if these are all washed up into one thing. Next, we go persona level, right? So I think of this, and this comes from Justin Michael, who I'm a huge fan of, CEO of the problem, right? The person accountable to the outcome. We'll come into the nuance about this later. And then last is what I call angle, which is like the bet you're making in the message, the tension we're calling out. It's like the way that our argument, right? And so what most people do is they write going, what am I going to say? Who are the titles I say it to? And then what's the company list that has those titles? And that's how they think about their messaging. Really, we need to do this in reverse. So that reverse order of my version creates the vendor-centric messaging because we're literally starting from our idea. Like, what do we do, right? We sell inboxes or something, right? It's high level. When we do this in the correct order, we get specificity. The words literally just write themselves, right? Like if you think of that VP who was an AE at Salesforce and joined a startup, it's like, hey, Tatiana, I see, I noticed you went from Salesforce to a little startup, right? And like that's your segment, right? And then the next line can be like a canned line that just says something like, I bet it's a big difference going from something so bureaucratic to something where you're accountable for every little tidbit, right? And then if the third line is like, we help people, blah, 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 and you just give the value prop in the context of that first thing, and then your CTA is like, would you like to learn more? That's a very thoughtful message. Like that's an astute observation, right? That will be meaningfully feel like, man, you understand me versus being like, Kellen, saw you're in the Bay Area. Like, sorry, the Niners got crushed by the Seahawks or whatever. So anyways, so section 5, right? Let's segment for a market, which is like not a mutually exclusive reality, right? Point being, if you think of these markets, right, if you sell the Series B tech, you could divide by their sales motion, you could divide by their growth trajectory, you could divide by, there's literally infinite ways we can do this. And so there's all sorts of this overlap, right? So if you think of like Shopify store owners, right? Like Shopify isn't like people, people on Shopify is not like this ethos, this worldview, right? It's just a platform. It's a tool they're using, right? And within that, you might have people who run ops lean, do lean ops versus people with deep ops, right? And if you looked at the makeup of these companies, you could theorize what sorts of things are going on inside of them, and you're going to speak to them differently, right? Same with if you think about like, do these guys have high returns versus lower returns? And you think of the words that they are seeing in their customer complaints, they're going to be different, right? If it's like, if it's a brand that like everyone just loves and is just known for like extreme quality, their returns might be like, Tatiana, I must have gotten a bad one. I'm so sorry, like wondering, blah, blah, blah. If it's like something known for garbage, it's, it's going to be a bunch of angriness, right? And the way, and if you do something that like helps how people process claims, let's say, The brand that has low returns might be really worried about automating it because like, no, we're really high touch. We really care about quality. We have this brand, and that's what you would need to speak to. Versus the person with like crazy high volume might be like, you don't want to have to keep hiring people to process these. Like we could just automate that stuff, right? Extremely different, right? Same market, same platform. The reality of their world changes the language we use. So to me, a segment's valid. Literally, it's just if the words change. And if the words don't change, it's not a segment, right? That's another thing I see a lot of is people segment stuff and then they run the same copy. The outcome doesn't change. They're seeing the same message. Like that's not what this is. And so when we do really, really good segmentation, it literally feels like we've been in their world. We understand them. You know, you'll present as better than the average SDR, even that's not scaling outbound, but is just doing like, you know, mindless outbound, which is a lot of them. So the main interrupt really is just stop treating the market as one blob, right? So talking persona and angle, right? CEO of the problem and how these words change. The persona is not a job title, right? It's ownership of an idea, right? And so just because they have a title doesn't mean they're the person that owns that, right? And so if you think head of sales, tiny company, enterprise, very, very different, right? You're not going to go to like the literally most senior salesperson at Salesforce for something that's like a manager effectiveness tool versus like if this is like the VP of sales and they have a team of 6 reps, there's all sorts of things that that person might buy, right? Sometimes the buyer isn't the title you even expect, right? And so the example I give is if you think of like you sell like let's say CRM or you sell Maildoso, right? Like generally you're going to sell it to like marketing or sales development or sales, right? And it's going to be like a leader. So the average, you know, the old way would be like we help people inbox. Who needs to do that? Like VP of sales. And then you pull a VP of sales and that's who you reach out to, right? But let's say that there's a company that's like extremely tech centric. The founder comes from engineering background and there's no go-to-market hires in the entire company except for one AE, right? That's going to be obviously the person that buys Maildoso. That's the person that buys the CRM. They're not, you know, they're not, but you would never in your head go like, I sell to AEs, right? So we have to go market segment, and the segment would be small companies with one go-to-market hire, where the founder comes from a technical background, and all of a sudden you have this really unique audience, and that person getting that message is really going to stand out. So, yeah, again, AE might be the head of sales. They own the pain, right? So they might, and I say they own the decision, or they at least influence it, because you can assume that that founder that hired this AE is not then sitting there going like, what's our record keeping? Like, they're like, I hired this guy. They do it, right? So angle is the tension we choose to name, right? And so, a lot of times I think of it as like kind of the trade-off they're managing, right? Because there's always like pros and cons to any given concept, right? And so we need to fit into their incentives, right? Or it reads like I'm just trying to push something on them for my behalf. So it's like, why is this beneficial to you? Right? So again, segmentation changes what's believable. What can we feasibly do? Right? You might again reach out to, I use small and large as like an easy distinction a lot, but like, you know, smaller companies, you might be able to talk about we can double something. And that might be like, maybe that's not even enough. Maybe you need to triple revenue to be exciting. Whereas like, you know, if you reach out to Salesforce, they're like, we'll double your, it's like, come on. Like if you can be 10% influential, you're going to be worth millions, you know? And so, and that's just one of the types of kind of like misguided messaging that comes up when you don't do good segmentation. So the goal is not like clever copy, right? It's not this like crazy stuff. It's literally like credible specificity. Like it's literally essentially math. Like what is the mathematical reasoning if we define these variables in a way that gave us a bunch more metadata than the average person has, right? So now we'll talk about signals, right? One form of context. So signals don't actually fix bad segmentation, right? They literally, to me, they amplify good segmentation. It's a second step concept on top of segmentation. Most teams today use signals as a shortcut because segmentation feels slow, and they're literally just bad at it, right? Like they don't know. And so to me, signal again, it's not magic. It's a context shift, and you can kind of think of it as like a lot of companies basically go like, who's our market? You know, this big average market, and then who has signals? And it's like 10% of that market. And then they still mono strategy this like high priority list. And so they're using like terrible tactics against a prioritized list, and they do increase win rates. Like it's going to be easier to win in that. So then it false positives them basically is like, hey, this is something that you should pursue. This is really good. This is easier. But they're never going to hit their long-term goals off of that. And it's missing out on the fact that like The way I'll talk about with founders is, Tatiana, if you walked up to 1,000 of your perfect ICP and you described exactly what you do, if none of them say yes, and you think that like we're doing something great, we just need to find signals, it's like you're completely missing the point. Like that is absolutely not the case. You know what I mean? And so the signal can be context shift, meaning like here's prioritization, here's urgency, here's like nuance to the argument, but there still needs to be this kind of core value, right? And so again, the context shift, the signal shift can be like, are they postponing something that they might have been doing otherwise? And what does that mean for their world all of a sudden? Are they, increasing prioritization? Is it showing that they're scared of something, right? Is there something that changed that they're noticing and putting pause to? Um, so yeah, okay. So I hit that, right? Small pond, can't hit your numbers. Um, they're definitely really good for like in deal cycle stuff, like monitoring that sort of stuff. But again, I believe that it's generally not enough to go, here's my mono market, here's my signals, off to the races, right? That's my belief. And so Chet Holmes talks about this, right? 3, 7, 30, 30, 30%. And it's basically the argument here is that 10% of your market is sort of like problem and solution aware. They're looking at stuff. Those are going to flag for signals. Elite outbound activates this entire top 40% of the market, which 4x's the surface area of reachable convertible accounts. And the way that it does that is by learning to speak to people who are not already problem and solution aware necessarily. They're sitting there passively doing other things. 3% buying, 7% aware. Let's see. Yeah, so I said that. Um, yeah, that's the other thing.
And
It's like
I
they
have
feel
so many questions to you.
yeah,
Yeah, I'm afraid to forget all of them. It's really interesting. How do you do research?
you're saying how do we do like what tools?
How do you do research? Yeah, what tools? Because I am as head of account executives. I understand a huge benefit of segmentation of customers, and how can I do it on my level? I can, for example, I can take the notes, analyze them, group them via Fireflies, and etc. and etc. But how it can be done before actually starting selling product using outbound?
Yeah, so the way that so the way I put it is like if we didn't exist, like if our product didn't exist, the market still does exist. And the
Mm-hmm.
market naturally groups themselves, right? Think of like go-to-market people, right? Like here we are, like cold email people, like that's a thing. And so if you think of like I sell to like sales agencies, right? You could go, okay, what are the different types of agencies? There's like cold email, there's like, cold email specific, there's like all bound, there's consultants that go like do coaching stuff. Um, and there's like fractional sales leaders that like get really involved and like replace the need for the leader, right? Like that's an example. And so it's somewhat there's like basically this like process of like arbitrarily like presuming how does this market see their own different like how do they see themselves and then testing it, right? Like commit to like assume that the way you segment is true, speak very directly to that persona. It either beats your average throughput and you're like, cool, we're on the right track, or it, falls under. And if it falls under, you're like, cool, that still loops back to informing like, okay, my assumptions on the front end weren't where they needed to be. But that probably will give you some other information, right? So if you're like, I think that it will work to speak to these people because they do this, and you're like, oh wait, actually that super didn't work. Usually that's going to just reinform like your next set of like assumptions, so it becomes a feedback loop of like testing, iterating over time, and not getting too wrapped up in
Mm-hmm.
like trying to like grasp perfection.
So before at the phase of testing, how many segments you should test approximately before you hit this perfect ICPs? I mean, like these four or maybe five of these three at the end give us the more result. And before this three, four, five, how many of segments do you usually test?
Yeah, let me see if I want to see if I had essentially. So like the way I would talk about that, first of all, it's like it really, 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 really is dependent on the audience, right? Some clients that we take on as an example sell to like very, we've worked like as an example, book people who have published a book, right? So we've
Mhm.
worked with people like publish a book. So it's like, okay, so the market is like independent authors. right? The way we segment it though, there's like, again, there's infinite. You could go like, what's the topic of the book? You could be how many, are they a new author? They've done a couple things or they've done a ton of things. You could be, are they an author by trade or they have a skill that they're known for and they wrote a book against it, right? And so what we tend to do, like when we sign up a new customer, is we sit down and in the first couple of weeks, we map out like what are the markets you work with on a high level, snapshot. What are the markets? What are the segments of those markets? What are the personas in the segments of those markets? And what are the different angles that we could have to all of them? And we map all, and that might be huge. It might be like 4 markets with 4 segments each. So now you have 16 combos. You have 3 different personas. So you have, what would that be like 58 different campaigns. And then if you had like 3 different angles to each of those, you'd have, right? What is that? 168 different campaigns to run, or 174, I think. So you'd have like that. That's a ton if you're going to run everything, right? And so, which is not what we're going to do, because what we're thinking about is sort of like what are the broadest sort of like segments or campaigns that we could run that most meaningfully advance what we understand about the audience, right? So usually what's happening is, as an example, maybe instead of getting like really, really granular on every single persona day one, maybe you do clump in the personas and you're like, go to market people inside of this segment and you do use copy and you're kind of thinking like, which segments are most respondent? And then as you see a segment being respondent, then you might get more granular with those personas, right? For that one segment, but maybe for your other segments, you keep staying a little high level until you find something that's interesting, right? So usually it's kind of like day one, if you have no idea what works, you're you're coming up with like, it's like you basically are coming up with ideas to run something to get any amount of traction. Once you have traction, it becomes like resource allocation where it's like, what percentage of this am I putting into like a known throughput environment to kind of like milk or farm what I already understand? And I believe people should just always be testing net new things. Like I think, it's kind of like the net new testing you do today is your best strategy next year. And the best time to be developing that is right now when you don't need it, not when all of a sudden your stuff falls through the floor. So it can depend, but like as a literal number, like we usually start with like at least 5 things at a time. I think somewhere in like the 3 to 10 at a time is probably generally appropriate. And I would think of like iteration velocity as more important than just like what can, don't spend 2 months to launch 10 things. I would rather you do 3 things every 2 weeks for those 2 months.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Questions?
Kellen.
Yeah.
Yeah, we have questions from the customers.
Nice. Yeah. Are there some in the chat? Nice. Commoditized service. Yeah, totally. So like I think one of the so like one of the like to okay, so to go back to like when I was in the startup, right? Like the reason literally the words message market fit came from this concept from actually Devin, you're the funniest person to ask this because Brian Balfour, who is VP of growth at HubSpot, wrote an article that was like $100 million fit, like market fit or something like that. Like, and it was basically like these 4 essays on the different quadrants of market fit, as he calls it. So it's like product market, market channel, like channel, audience and audience product or something like that, right? And the idea was all of this had to do, product market fit has to do with if Max knows what problem he has, if he knows what I do, will he say yes, at my price point and can I retain him? That's basically product market fit. All of that is predicated on a product existing. It's a relationship to a product. But imagine you don't have a product and you're willing to build literally whatever the audience is excited about. That was my term message market fit because we're inventing a message. In the message, we can say whether or not the product exists. You can make it up. And so you can iterate what you say to an audience and you can essentially like package your words infinitely different ways. And what it's doing is it's getting someone to show up to a conversation. Like, this isn't what you should do, but you could lie. You could literally completely lie, get someone onto a call, and then on the call, if you're an amazing seller, you'll probably still sell those people, right? And so the idea is like you have message market fit, do they show up? You have product market fit, which is like, do they buy and retain? And in the middle, you have sales process, right? In some instances, what you say is the sales process that they buy and they're happy from, right? That's hyper transactional sales. Sometimes that exists. Sometimes it's like multiple years, right? And what they're buying is completely separated from the reason they come talk to you in the first place. So in a commoditized service, I just know that the reason they're going to come to me is not going to be because my product is better, right? But what can be better? I can understand the audience better, right? That's the whole thesis here, would just be like define them more specifically, right? And that's going to show that like mastery of, of an audience in a way that they're going to be more excited to talk to you, right? That's a very common one. This is, you can use things like signals and stuff. I know sometimes I kind of like am, hating on that a little, but the idea is just essentially like your words should change. What you do doesn't need to change, but your audience, the words they would describe for what they're looking for do. And so that's how I'd think about commoditized services. Nice. Okay, cool. No question. Yeah, I'll post the slides. I'll definitely share the slides. Cool. I'll keep flying through this. So, let's see. Yeah, signal is top of the pyramid, feels more effective, opportunity is lower, right? So we find another 30% of the market by figuring out people who don't have this urgency, right? And so I joke that they're coping, not searching, right? Think of it as like companies are messy, right? Anyone who's been a salesperson, like, have you ever sat there and been like, my sit tech stack is perfect? No. And you've also never sat there and been like, my tech stack is messed up, but leadership is perfectly on top of what needs to change about it. Never happens, right? So there's all this messy, crazy chaoticness going on. And good messaging, that's like we're piercing through that and we're refreshing prioritization, right? And what changes urgency is what they're thinking about, right? And so we're not chasing like, why should you do this right now? Yeah, we're just basically ingesting favorite after. Thanks, bro. Okay, cool. So how to build this. This is the last section. So this is like how to apply this literally like tomorrow, right? So number one, don't confuse in market with total market, right? Signal is a strategy for a slice of your market, but it's not the strategy for the whole market, right? So message market fit is how we earn attention without a trigger potentially. So instead of this is what happened, how can we get them to care, right? Starts with market, right? Define the markets you work with, segments of those markets, the personas specific to the segments of the markets, and then the angles, right? Don't over engineer this, just light, easy, especially because when you first codify this, you're just going to run campaigns. If you're only going to run 3 to 10 things, you don't need a bajillion combinations here. So it's like just, make it conversational, make it simple to explain. Right? Market gets you a list. Segment gives you the specific language against the list. Find the persona who's the CEO of the problem in that segment. They own the decision, and then the angle is basically speaking to the world that they're having to live in today. And ideally, you're kind of telling them, like, bad messaging is often like, Max, you're in this situation, the world is falling apart, and I'm going to come save you. You need me. And that feels like it's forceful, it feels manipulative, and feels not true. Great message is like, hey, Max, I know you have a million things going on, and half of the days you're being told we need better Salesforce deployment. The other half of the day, you're like, we have too much technology and it slows me down, right? That is speaking to a worldview. And then if your pitch is in the context of like, here's how I help you balance this strain you have, it's much more acceptable, right? Because it doesn't force them to take this worldview of like, I suck and I need this person to help me. And it's more of like, yeah, I'm dealing with this and this is going to help me. One of the ways I put it is like, be the sword, not the superhero, because our buyer should be the superhero and they're like hero's journey, right? We're just going to be this person granting them these superpowers. So build 3 to 5 segments inside of a market, right? Not one market, write messages specific to these people. It can be the same product, but the reality of how they use it's different. Overlay signals after if you want to, right? So it's a prioritization engine, not a definition engine. Um, yeah, define the audience, segment it, speak the world, use the timing to win faster. Market, segment, persona, angle. I could say it a bajillion times, right? Optionally use timing, but again, I don't think it's necessary. Thank you. My company is deallab.com. I'm Kellen Casebeer. I love doing stuff like this. I love outbound, just so you know, it probably comes through a little bit. And any questions, I'm happy to go through. Thank you, Syed.
It was amazing. Thank you so much, Karen. We have prepared some questions from Maildoso in case we won't have some in chat, but we can
Cool.
go one by one in chat. And if there is some additional time, we will as well ask our
Yeah.
questions.
Yes. Okay. So Ashley, said like our signal is not just another way of making our list more segmented and tailored. We have never used them, but have been researching. Yes. Okay. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. So Ashley, the way I would put it is it kind of can depend, right? So if your TAM, like if your sincere TAM is like 500,000 accounts, 10% of that. So if you think of it as like your time is the constraint, and it's like what accounts should I put one-to-one time against, and what accounts can be one to many. Signals usually prioritizes this tiny slice at the top that would be really good candidates for one-to-one outreach. And if that's going to help you hit your goal, you should just do that. Great. Most companies, if they only did that, they will improve what's happening, but they won't actually be able to reach their goals all the way. And a little bit more of like a comprehensive plan, I think, can be helpful. The other thing I would suggest again is like if it's like, hey Ashley, you take your product and you go talk to 1,000 people in your audience and say, this is what we do. Do you want to hear about it? If none of them say yes, I believe that that's like a company strategy issue, and it's something to be reconciled with like product basically. And so yes, signals create really specific tailored lists. Usually, the amount of people in any given month on that is not enough to hit your number. And even if you had a list of, again, if you had this huge TAM, and then you're like, let's find the people that are hiring a VP of sales, just as a random thing. And maybe that's enough accounts. Of all the people hiring VP of sales, some of them are getting a first VP of sales. Some of them hired and fired someone within the last 60 days that like super quickly didn't work out. Some of them, their VP of sales is now the CO, their ex VP of sales is now the COO, right? Like some of them have like a director of sales that have been there for 5 years, but for some reason they're not promoting, right? And like all of these situations really meaningfully change what the story would be of how you go talk to these people. If signals helps bring that to us, that's great, but you should probably still have segmentation even within these signals of like how we're talking to these people. That would be my belief. You are welcome definitely to like, first of all, gtmcafe.com. We do a Friday 10 a.m. call every single week. Come talk to us. We can get crazy in depth on this. Feel free to DM me as well. Happy to talk about it because it is like, it can be a little bit nuanced. It's really market dependent, but I do believe most companies are like essentially looking for the easy button with signals when really it's like we need like strategy. Feel free to throw a follow up. So Jesse said, can we discuss tools used? We use Apollo. Shout out Apollo. I love Apollo too. And really, really, really hard on oh dang, it's broken.
Kellen, we've lost you for
Oh
30
no, oh
seconds.
no. Yeah. So basically, so what was the last thing you heard? Someone give me the last thing you heard. Did you hear like start with ocean? Like create an ocean account, push it to
No.
play, segment
Shout
and
out to
play.
Apollo.
Okay. So okay. Yeah. So Apollo's great. We use Clay. In Clay, we would generally like build an account list in like an ocean.io, push it to Clay, use like Clayagent to build our own segmentation stuff. We would use a bunch of the normal, like the Prospios, ICPs, lead magics, better contacts to pull contact data. And then we'll push those to campaigns typically, or CRM if we're like working with a team and they're going to go do the execution side. But Apollo has their AI team has gone really, really hard over the last like year and a half. They've developed a lot. And I know that they're building, I think they call them power ups or something like that. But I do think you could just do this in Apollo. And so I wouldn't force using Clay to get like when I started my agency, Clay was not what we used. We did use Apollo. And we did this exact same thing. And it was basically like build the Apollo list everyone targeting your same audience would build, and then figure out other filter criteria that you can apply to like subdivide that list that changes your wording. Right. It got crazy easy when we started having AI tools to be able to do this. But when this framework was developed using these same data tools, it was just that like the idea was like every single person who targets VP of sales in tech like builds the same list to target them. And so if your list is predicated on something different, it just changes the words. So that's the Apollo versus Clay one. Feel free to throw a follow up to that as well. Abanov asked about soup. He knows that I'm anti soup. I'm I do not believe I'm a soup disrespecter. I don't believe it's a food. You drink soup. It's not really caloric. And every single good meal ever, like if you think of like the best meal ever, and someone's like dump a bucket of water on it to make it soup, they're out of their mind. Um, yeah, have found work well. Okay, so Jesse, good thing. Some are not accurate, right? For filters. So a concept that comes from I think Will Allred is like using uncertainty in your copy. And so a big part of making this work is like, let's say I segment, I guess, essentially it's like, if you think of it as like we're reaching out to someone who has some sort of like decision-making power, if we come heavy-handed with like, I know this, so this, it's kind of, it's like manipulative and it feels like we're really like forceful. So using a tone of uncertainty against our data allows us to get the benefit of saying like, hey, I think this is true, but it softens the way that we say it, which opens it up to be corrected, right? If we come in really like affirmative certain, then they're going to kind of like dislike it if it's inaccurate. And they're either going to like delete it, mark it as spam, or they're going to be like, you're an idiot. This email sucks. Where if I'm like, hey, Max, seems like it, like, hey, Max, looked like you guys hired a VP 2 months ago that's already left, wondering if something didn't go the way you were expecting, right? That's like so different than like, Max, looks like you hired a VP that didn't work out and you need a new one, right? Like that first one, that guy might be like, actually, we decided we don't want one. Like, screw you. Or if the second one's like, yeah, dude, like I'm kind of confused. I thought this was going to work really well and it didn't. We're actually trying to weigh like, should we hire another one or should we just like not get a VP, right? That type of stuff. It also, yeah, because actually another good point on this is like this pulls out more high quality negative responses too, because your message is built on something that is sort of like thoughtful and uh like the word I use is like astute. It's basically like even if the person doesn't have demand for your services, the likelihood that they're going to be like warm towards you because you kind of did your homework and because like these messages will stand out. You'll get messages back that are like, thank you for blah blah blah. You still might get your nose. You will get your nose, not even might, for sure. Any other questions? I know we got some Maildoso ones, but I also don't know how much time we have.
Yeah, there is.
Cool.
We have time,
Cool.
but I would love to ask you one. What segmentation ideas would you suggest to Maildoso?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. Okay. Are you mostly focused on like your next 5,000 customers? Are those going to be like in-house companies or is it going to be like through like agency and like service businesses working with people typically? What does that look like?
Well, it changes. It depends highly on the prices of our packages. So maybe a half of year ago, the majority of our customers were only lead agencies. The majority of them were lead agencies, and some tools. But recently, when we roll out Google Workspaces and our packages became cheaper, we started onboarding really newbies in cold email industry.
Yeah.
I mean, like customers who don't even know why they need domains to create mailboxes.
Yep.
And and our customers are shifting. Like previously, we had maybe 3 or 4 main ICPs. This is lead generation agencies, software companies, and finance tools, maybe even
Yep.
some brokers, and lead generation agencies selling to predominantly these niches. But with the additional tools, products, and changes of pricing, the customers change. So, what could you offer to us in terms of segmentation right now?
Yeah. So, I think some of them that are like low-hanging fruit, I would look for like teams that have SDRs where someone has either been promoted within the SDR org multiple times or has been a rep for like a really long time. Basically, like overpowered SDRs. Like if you find someone who has an SDR org, so they value like outbound sales development, and then they have someone in the company that seems to be like really, really good, then I would talk about what percentage of their TAM that person can be outreaching to via Maildoso versus the way most teams have it set up, basically. And so to me, like so one segment could be like, do they have like a sales development superstar on the team that should be like responsible for like one to their whole market emailing, right? Something like that. Another one would be companies with no SDRs but do have AEs, right? Where it might be like, hey, what, and so kind of like competing for similar to what lead gen does, but being like, hey, your AEs aren't being fed. A lot of times I'm thinking about like, what's the sales team makeup? What's the marketing team makeup, right? Because you can like, let's say you enrich against like, do these people run paid ads? Yes or no? Do they do a bunch of
Yeah.
content stuff? Yes or no? What is like the
Mhm.
price point that they sell at? And so you can kind of infer like, if they don't do paid ads and they're not doing a bunch of content stuff, then you're going to know that they're doing some sort of like outreach. They're going to be, something like that. And I would speak to that. And I would put in it like, doesn't seem like Maildoso's doing, paid ad, you guys do a bunch of content, but like, doesn't seem like you're doing this or this. Like, was wondering how you get your meetings. Seems like maybe Max and so on the team probably split their time between working deals and opening them. If I don't know, this is actually a very good email, but if it's some version of like, if instead you could be touching 80% of your TAM each month instead of 1%, like what would the win rate downstream of that look like or something like that? Or like, yeah, so I think
Awesome,
that's
awesome,
one.
Kellen.
I also think one that could be interesting would be like looking at sales leaders who don't follow a bunch of influencers, right? Like basically like, if you took like your target accounts and then found like their three most senior revenue leaders that you would want to sell to, and then you could basically check against like, do these people follow Eric Noslowski? Do they follow Jordan Crawford? Do they follow, Marina? I don't know how to pronounce her last name. Sorry, Marina. But like, it's like, do they follow these people? And if no, then it might be like, Max, seems like you're not that into this whole, and then I would, like some loaded term, right? Like this whole like spray and pray industry. Like it didn't look like you follow this person, or this person, which tells me you probably have a different approach to how you do go to market. Wondering, do you still think, blank isn't useful in your world or something like that? And I do like disqualification centric.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Great idea.
All right, let's
A
see.
quick
Hobby
idea.
filtering out companies with a lot of sales folks and making the copiers all around. Yeah. Let's see. You have a bazillion salespeople are using video content to educate and nurture. You'd think this would stick. Yes. Possibly. Yeah. So I guess, yeah. So what you're saying is like, yeah. So it's like find companies who have a bunch of sellers. I was in a company like this. Like I worked for a company that we had 800 reps in the US alone.
Wow.
And the idea is like you're using video content to educate and nurture. So the big thing here is I think this is too presumptive. I would assume that you have a bunch of sales reps, things are like dysfunctional. And instead of being like this is kind of like in an ideal world, they're using video to educate and nurture. Reality is it's probably like, hey, you invest in like 800 sales reps, but I bet no more than 80 of those people make up the majority of your revenue. Wondering if the remaining, 720 had a bunch of customer testimonials from your top sellers, would it help them in their conversations with blah blah blah, something like that. That's a little too long. I'm like, for some reason I'm riffing all these too long today, but something about that's like a little bit like you got to make it a little softer, a little bit less like, this. I think this just presumes a little bit too much like function, like they're on top of things too much basically. And no, not founders, because if they have a bunch of salespeople, it's not like, it's like if they have a bunch of sellers, they're gonna have like robust sales leadership, and you don't want to go too high. The founder's like, I don't know what the sellers do, right? The founder barely knows what the VP does, maybe. And so I think something like that, like a director level, maybe like a regional director is like really good for something like that, because that person probably has like their own number, they have budget, they have autonomy, there's enough revenue under them to like get things done, but it's not too bureaucratic that you're trying to influence like central HQ.
Thank you so much, Kellen. It
Thank
was
you.
really interesting webinar.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining. And yeah, see you later. Bye.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everybody. Thank you
Thank
for
you
the
so
good
much.
questions. See ya.